Welcome, Dr. Perry, to Those Who Give a Damn podcast. I am so excited to have you on today. We are in some times in this country where we need voices like yourself. I have watched you over the course of almost 2 decades now, because I've been in DC 10 years. So I knew you before I moved to DC. So coming up almost on 2 decades of just your work in the community. And one of the things, and particularly I love about your work, it is connected to the people who are affected the most. And so I want you to open up with talking to me about what really drives you and how did you get started on this journey of people first, right? A lot of people say that, but I've seen that in your scholarly work, I've seen that in your activist work, and I've seen that in your community work, Dr. Perry.
I appreciate that. Oh my gosh. And I am thrilled to be here with you. You have been on the vanguard of work impacting communities, particularly Black communities, impoverished communities, marginalized communities for decades yourself. I mean, Mississippi is better because of you, for sure, and the poorest state in the country. And we met when I used to live in Octavia County, Starkville, Mississippi, which is at the time was the poorest county in the country. I was there because me landing there as an academic was also a long story as it relates to my own upbringing. I was raised in a family of educators in Northwest Ohio, in Toledo, Ohio. If you've ever seen a Jeep Wrangler in the road, it was made in Toledo, Ohio, at the Uniontown, about 45 minutes south of Detroit, Michigan. Toledo was where my parents met in 1966 and were married since 1969, celebrating 55 years this year. And both of them were educators who insisted on instilling the lived history of African Americans in their students, but also in any community member, any family member, of course, as well, that would listen. My parents were from the silent generation, and my dad is 91, my mom is 80. And so they were raised in an era themselves where there was a strong relationship between the opportunities you were given as African Americans and your responsibility to use those opportunities to then give back to your community. It was just a given. That's just what folks did who were born in the 30s and 40s and 50s. And so I was privileged to be the baby family member in the Perry family. I'm an older brother and older sister. And so my parents were slightly older when I was born in 1982, but they instilled in each and every one of us the necessity, actually, and the expectation in our household that we take the opportunities we've been given and then we turn back around and give them back to those who are less fortunate. And so I've always been interested in politics because when I was a kid, when I was in high school, college, etc., I was always interested in why why issues did or did not get done, why certain items got on the agenda. As a kid, I was particularly interested in something as basic as why was trash picked up on Tuesday? And these were the kinds of questions that really got me interested in responsiveness and what I now know as an expert, of course, and the study of political representation. And so wherever I have gone, whether I've been Michigan, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Virginia, or here in DC, I have sought to use the power of citizenry that we all have to use my voice to ensure that those who have less opportunity, those who are stretched to the margins, recognize government as a place to go, be their balm and Gilead here on earth.
Absolutely. I want you to talk about the role of local government, right? So we're in the middle of a presidential election and we're going to get there. But talk about how important the role of local government is in such a time as this that we're living in, Dr. Perry.
Wow, local government's everything. So my bias is I am an expert on urban politics. That's how I got my start. I've written several books on Black mayors and what Black mayors do for Black people in predominantly white cities. I've always argued that if you are Black, regardless of where you live, you deserve representation that smells like, looks like, sounds like, tastes like the cultural experience from which you have come from. And whether that community is like in my hometown, Toledo, Ohio, that's 25% Black, or neighboring Detroit, Michigan, that's 90% Black, the expectation is that you deserve right to representation. Where do you get most of that? It's local politics. The news will lead us to believe that, presidential politics is the most important thing. Presidential politics is central. It does control significant issues as it relates to the Supreme Court and and of course, appointing lifelong jurists who are the law of the land. Also has a misnomer in that, if we only pay attention to presidential elections, we forget that it's actually in the local elections where you have the greatest impact. You still bread and butter politics works in local elections. You can show up to your neighborhood council meeting, show up to your city council meeting, and you can make your complaint heard. You can make your voice heard, and you can hold accountable the people there right in front of your face. Go ahead and actually do what you've asked them to do. And if they don't, you can actually reach out to them. You can contact them. You can set up a meeting with them. And they are, for all intents and purposes, are pretty much obligated to respond, because the localization of politics makes it very parochial. And to disengage and be a local politician really makes you a pariah in your own community. And so to everyone's advantage to use local politics, whether it be the zoning board, planning board, local school board, neighborhood commission, city council. There are so many things to be concerned about locally. Principally, what local politics is all about, certainly, is the future, and that kids in schools and something as basic as the quality of our streets, our air, our water quality, and our pipes, our sewer quality. These are really important issues that decide our quality of life. And if you don't know, most African Americans live in substandard local conditions, even in cities that have had Black representation for a long time.
Absolutely. And I want you to connect, Dr. Perry, how not only how important local elections are, but the connection between, for instance, federal and local and state elections. So like we see, for example, had Stacey Abrams won in Georgia, right? She was going to expand Medicaid and Medicare for all, right? We've seen the impact of Westmore in Maryland. Talk to the viewers and connect the dots between how all those different pieces of government really worked when they vote in every single election on their local level, on their state level, and their federal levels. And I want you to connect the dots for them on how all of those are interconnected.
Oh, absolutely. So we have a thing called federalism in this country. And federalism is what governs what we do. There's all kinds of federalism, dual, cooperative, etc. But that matters not for our purposes today. Well, what we need to understand is that federalism means that in the Constitution, we have states. States are recognized as entities that have power, and that federal government can give money and support from the federal budget to states. States then have the responsibility of distributing those resources to cities. That's how it works. We have a distributive justice system in America. We are, in fact, not a democracy. We've never been a direct democracy. We are a small d democratic, small r republic. So as a democratic republic, what do? That means that we send people to city council. We send people to state legislature. And we send people to here in Washington, D.C., in Congress to represent our interests. And federalism tells us that when we have a conflict, and that there may be a law that a judge may pass, or a state Supreme Court may pass, or a state legislature may pass, if it's in conflict with the Constitution, the federalism clause says that the Constitution always wins out. That when it comes to state versus federal, it's the federal government whose law has supremacy. Now, the challenge has become, of course, those of us who study race, we know that everything from the Electoral College to how we count and apportion congressional elections as a result of the census every 10 years, to how we, of course, obviously count electoral college votes in presidential elections. That's coming up this November. All of that leads us to understand that much of this, how it's been framed, was framed around race and racism and the lack of rights toward African Americans, Native Americans, and other folks who are not explicitly mentioned in the U.S. Constitution, and had to be amended roughly about 17 times since 1789, since it was originally ratified, in order to make it somewhat better for those of people like me and you. But the local government is central, because if you are trying to get something as basic done as your ability to not have a high tax bill, or your ability to lower your water bill, or your ability to make sure that your trash is picked up when it maybe was missed for you this week, those are connected to local officials who get resources from property taxes, get resources from other forms, local grants. A lot of the money comes to federal government, through community development block grants, other kinds of dollars that help cities be able to function and to meet their citizen needs. But the state government comes into play, whereas we have, of course, because we live in states, everyone here, except, of course, those of us here in D.C. and the American Samoa and Northern Mariana Islands and Puerto Rico, etc. The rest of the country lives in states, and states allow us to do the counting of citizens. States allow us to apportion congressional representatives every 10 years based on the census population within that state. And that then tells us who our federal representatives will be. And so there is a direct connection at every level, local, state, and federal, that either comes right back to your doorstep or the connection exists because it stems from your doorstep. That should hopefully make it clear to folks that voting is central. It solves every challenge we may have, but we've never really maximized our ability to vote to our highest levels. A lot of it because of disenfranchisement, a lot of it because of challenges to our election laws, our voting laws, our limited polling data, what we did in Shelby v. Holder, some of the other cases, gutting the Voting Rights Act, but what we know for sure is that the higher the participation at the local and state level, we also know the higher the participation at the federal level. So I encourage folks, not just the top of the ticket, not just the bottom of the ticket, but every single step along the way. Because if you don't, every opportunity you miss to cast a vote as a U.S. citizen, you're really abdicating your power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so tell me about this, Dr. Perry. You have made a decision to run for ANC Commissioner. What does local leadership means to you, and how can you bring about change at the local level as an ANC Commissioner? What is your vision for your single member district?
Yes, I appreciate that. So, I am a candidate on the November ballot to be an advisory neighborhood commissioner here in my district in Ward 7E06. I am unopposed at the moment. I expect my only name will be the name on the ballot. But whether or not that's the case, I decided to run in this position because, frankly, it's been frustrating seeing limited change and a lot of pontificating about ANCs in D.C. Because I study politics, local politics in particular, and mayors, it's been quite frustrating for me in the 5 years that I've lived here in D.C. There's been a lot of platitude from everyone from the mayor's office down to other ANCs as it relates to issues, a lot of statements. Frankly, there has not been a lot of alleviation of those challenges. And as someone, again, who studies cities, D.C. is odd in that D.C. has the resources as one of the richest, smaller big cities in the country, and yet seems to always be short on resources. Our budget's never been very clear. What resources go to what wards and for what reasons has never been very clear. The status of our schools, and I have been a former D.C. at-large State Board of Education candidate in 2020. And so schools are always close to my heart. Obviously, I'm an educator. Status of our schools here east of the river, everybody knows, are substandard. And for me, what we're talking about all those issues, particularly east of the river, we're talking about Black people.
Absolutely.
And for someone who studies Black politics, who's an expert in Black politics, who formerly led the Department of Black Politics at Howard University, where Black politics was founded, where we train people like Elijah Cummings, like Kamala Harris, etc., to go out in the world and do Black politics for the rest of us. It certainly behooves me when I walk around my neighborhood and with my dog, and I see all the litter, I see all the broken fences, I see all the overgrown grass, I see all the abandoned homes, I see all of the kids from school that I know are not getting the best education because the numbers show that these Black kids are not passing a 4th and 6th grade level, are not reading or doing math at the appropriate levels they're supposed to. And for me, as someone who studies Black folks, I would expect, who's never lived in a major city, now when you come to a major city like D.C., that's been led by Black folks for 40 years, that you have the resources, the cultural resonance, what we call the shared racial experience, to frankly give a damn about those people who live east of the river and actually do something about it. And sadly, we've seen a lot of DC politicians not do that. What's unfortunate to me is that it's not unique to DC. Black politicians are not a guarantee in terms of representing the Black interests of all Black people, particularly whether you're a woman, whether you're queer like me, whether you are poor. You can see example after example of middle-class Black mayors, Black council members not really standing up for the least among us. And other than seeing them on election season every 4 years at your church, you don't see them again. And that's really devastating. And so I decided to put my hat in the ring because I'm tired of it. I'm frustrated that people can live in the shadow of American democracy, in the shadow of the U.S. Capitol, and students and kids and neighborhoods on this side of the river where I live don't have the same resources on the other side of town where I work, near Howard University. They don't have the same level of attention and care to their roads, to their sewers, to their schools, to their neighborhoods, and the kinds of businesses that they invite to come in their neighborhoods. It's obviously a story of haves and have-nots. ANCs allow residents to have direct relationships with elected neighborhood commissioners whose job it is to carry that message to their local council member and to ensure that those issues are addressed administratively in the city system. I just called 911 myself, sitting right here where I am now in my neighborhood 2 nights ago. And you know what happened when I called 911? I was put on hold. You know how long I was put on hold? For 2 minutes. I had to call back 4 times in order to actually get someone to answer the phone. And then I had to explain, of course, all the things. Imagine if it was a life-threatening situation. Imagine if I was actually on my last breath. I don't have the time to call back 3 or 4 times. I've never lived somewhere where these kinds of basic services are just assumed to just not work because, oh, hey, this is just what DC gives. That's unacceptable. That's standard. I won't allow to continue, at least not in my district here in 7E06. And I will hope that we all understand that ANCs, just like in Dayton, Ohio, that has neighborhood priority boards, the cities that have created this really came out of the era of progressivism 100 years ago that said that cities and residents should have a better opportunity to connect with their elected officials and that they should have the right and access and opportunity to do so. The challenge is that what we have here in DC versus other neighborhood commissions that work in some of these other cities is that, one, most of those cities are weak mayor cities, meaning that the mayors are really city managers. So neighborhood boards have more power than they would in a system that we have here in DC. And secondly, the problem ANCs here in DC, that they have no budgetary authority. And so even if the council is dealing with the issue that affects this particular 7E06 single member district that I hope to represent come January, I would still get no say in what that item is. I won't be invited to the meeting. I wouldn't be, invited to necessarily testify. And these are kinds of structural changes, because I study this stuff, that I want to bring to the office and change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you're going to be an example. Dr. Perry, when I started this podcast, I really focus on young people, and I have a really big young following. What is your advice that you would give to young voters about the importance of staying engaged?
Do not abdicate your power. Politics is about power. I'll say it again. Politics is about power. The other definition of politics is that politics is about who gets what, which means inherently this is a distribution system. Somebody is getting something. You vote, you participate, you go to your civic meetings, you go to your city council meetings, go to the state legislature, come to Congress, do those things, because when you do that, you are seen, you are heard, and those who are seen, those who are heard, 80, 90% of them get exactly what they want. You'll be amazed that you would think that in 2024, that the best way to contact your Congress member might be by tweet or X, or might be by Facebook or something. Nope, the best way to contact your Congress member or your council member or your ANC member is literally still by knocking on their door or by picking up the phone and calling. What we know for a fact is when you show up, you win. but you got to show up. And so I challenge young people who are like, oh, the system is not for me, or oh, I was always about the lesser of two evils. It's not. It's about the greater of two options. We do live in a two-party system, and so there's always going to be, in most cases on the ballot, a Democrat or a Republican. For my ANC race, for example, it is nonpartisan. For State Board of Education races in D.C., it's nonpartisan. But in most cases, you're going to find a Democrat or Republican on the ballot, and you need to decide which party fits your interest. Don't hear it from me. Go hear it learn it from yourself. Google the Republican Party platform. Google the Democratic Party platform. Decide for yourself what they decided in July and August this summer for what they are going to campaign on throughout this entire season we're in right now. And then you go and do the work of telling your friends and your neighbors to go participate and show up as well. Once we have, I think, about an 85 percentile electoral count. In other words, 85% of people who are eligible to vote do go out and vote and are able to cast them. And then we, after a couple successive elections, realize that the system still isn't working. Then I might buy the argument that I hear from a lot of young people that, oh, the system is failing. We actually don't know if the system is failing if only 30% of us show up in a local election. Maybe if that number was 70%, then we would have a sense of saying, okay, majority of us have been participating for years and it still isn't working out for us. It's hard to say that, though, when, for example, here in D.C., the mayor just got elected last time with really, a plurality of 1/3 of the electoral vote of those who are eligible, meaning that a whole bunch of people didn't vote at all. A whole bunch of people sat at home. And so the idea that people have a mandate, that people have all of this support is not accurate. And in local elections in particular, we see a very low turnout because there is no news following them. There is no media following the story. You don't know when the local election is. It might be in March, might be in June, might be in July, might be in August, might be in September. There's an election this week in several localities throughout the country. And so it may not get as much attention, because you're not going to find it on CNN or MSNBC or Fox or Al Jazeera or whatever national outlet you watch. And unless you watch local news, then you won't get it. And so I want to tell young people that your voice matters, that in every single election where young people have shown up, they have won, and that in general, outside of politics, we need young people. We need young people to show up and make your voices heard. It has always been young people who have moved the vanguard forward of change in America. Martin Luther King was in his 20s, 25 years old, when he led the Montgomery bus boycott. The Little Rock Nine, who we commemorated this week, who had to have the 101st Airborne brought to Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957 to help 16, 17-year-olds walk to and get through what was then the largest high school in the country. It's always been young people. Diane Nash, John Lewis, leading the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Stokely Carmichael, these are all, why do we remember these people? Because they were young people. They were high school and college students that have always been successful. Even the founders of the country, so-called founders, the white, racist men, slave owners, they were in their 20s. This is a country where young people have always been the people leading the way. But if they sit down, sit on their heels, and don't show up for politics until they're in their 40s like me, then at that point, it's not too late. But it is a missed opportunity. And so if you are 40 and under, if you're 18 to 40, if you will turn 18 before November 5th, you need to get out and register yourself to vote and participate and make your voice heard and have these conversations with your friends and your family members. That's really how you change politics. I promise you, I've seen it, whether it's been in Mississippi, in Michigan, in New York, in California, in Massachusetts, or here in D.C., I have seen it time and time again where young people whose voice is in fact heard, who takes the courage to go out and run for office yourself, not only do they often win, they often get exactly what they campaigned to. Look at what we've seen in Congress, where we have some of the youngest members of Congress ever, folks who would have never thought 20, 30 years ago that you could have people elected to Congress. Yeah, we know that the Constitution says that you can win at age 25, but no one actually thought that was possible. And why did they say that then? Because again, remember back in the day, that's how young that they were. But now, as we have gotten older, because we live longer lives. We have found that not to be the case. But young people are genuinely the heartbeat of America. I don't care if you're liberal, you're conservative, you're black, you're white, you're orange, you're green, whatever. If you are young, use your youthfulness to make your voice heard and make this country better. I'm counting on you to do it.
Wow, that's powerful, Dr. Perry. Last question before we get into the Complete the Sentence segment. Every year during election time, and particularly national elections during the presidential cycle, we've heard the last couple of times that the very fabric of America, democracy, is on the line. Do you believe that this election in 2024, the very fabric of America democracy is on the line?
This is just such a sad reality for us because it was all preventable, again, based on how we did not show up in 2016, how we allowed ourselves to be duped by Russian misinformation that was infiltrating African-American households via our social media pages, telling us to vote for Jill Stein or that Hillary Clinton was killing people in pizza shops in New York. Unfortunately, we did not learn the lesson in 2016. So here we are again, where Donald Trump is on the ballot. The short answer to your question is absolutely yes. Here's the threat to democracy. And that's not a partisan statement. Here's why. Well, one, because he himself has said on record multiple times in recordings that he would be a dictator on day one. He has said on record in multiple times, in multiple recordings, that he is going to use the presidency to weaponize the powers of the federal government to invoke revenge against his political enemies. He has said time and time again, he needs to win this election so he himself does not have to go to jail and state prison. And it should be worth noting that the only state and district prosecutors that have sought reason to charge the former president with crimes are all African American. We'll remind people of that. You got Braggs in Southern District of New York. You've got Fannie Willis in Atlanta. And I'm missing one other case. But it's African American prosecutors who have brought every single state level case. Letitia James, also Attorney General in New York, who have brought every single case. And so we know that Black voices matter, that voting for the kinds of nominees that would appoint those kinds of individuals that would hold people like Trump to accountability, that's necessary. So democracy is under threat because Donald Trump said it. So it's not a comment that's being made up by those who oppose Donald Trump. He himself has said that we will never have to vote again if we just vote for him this time. Doesn't that sound suspicious to you? I mean, it certainly should. Why would you never want to vote again? Like, that is, very odd and very dangerous. When most of the national security officers of Republican and Democratic presidential administrations going back to the 20th century have all supported anyone other than Trump, what does that tell you? When most of the global world leaders are on record saying that they are afraid of what a Trump presidency would do to global economic order, this is why we know that democracy is on the ballot this time. It's also on the ballot legitimately. If we elect Donald Trump or any Republican, frankly, let's say Donald Trump, is gone tomorrow and it's J.D. Vance. It doesn't matter. We elect any Republican for president. That president will likely have a chance to appoint 2 Supreme Court justices. What screwed us over in 2016 was that Trump got, in one term, 3 Supreme Court justices. By the way, never happened in American history. And those people are all 50-something years old and will serve for the rest of our lifetimes. So we've already have lost the Supreme Court for our lifetime. It's a 6-3 minority for those of us who are concerned about the interest of people of color, people who look like me and you. But we can make some headway in this election whereby we expect 1 or 2 resignations as folks are getting older on the Supreme Court. And if those folks are appointed by a Democratic president, then what is 6-3 may become obviously 5-4. And that would make it a much better situation in terms of final decisions that impact folks. So democracy is on the ballot because Donald Trump has said so. Democracy is on the ballot because every other democratic nation has gone on record to be fearful of what they remember the last Donald Trump presidency to bring to them. And democracy is on the ballot because we know that if the Supreme Court were to have the opportunity to not be 6-3, but God forbid to be 8-1 in terms of conservative interest, then anybody who's Black, who's a woman, who's minority, who's queer, who's poor, who's an immigrant, all of you can say goodbye to your rights, not for this election, but for the rest of your living lifetime on this earth.
Absolutely. For generations to come. That's a valid point. We can count on the good professor to lay out the facts. I appreciate that, Dr. Perry. We're going to move into our complete the sentence segment. The first sentence goes hand in hand with the question I just asked you. When I think about the future of democracy, I feel
hopeful because I am confident that young people are going to show up and show out.
the most important quality in a political leader is
character is as central, character over ambition always.
If I could give one piece of advice to current political leaders on how to bring people together, it would be
look people in the eye, listen to their issues, and actually go out and solve them.
One thing that gives me hope about the future of our country is
that the future of the country is yet to be written, and that we have the opportunity to write it each and every day we wake up, how we treat our neighbors, how we engage in our politics.
I give a damn about
you. And that's what politics is for, to make sure that we are representing you. And you have an obligation to let us know what your interests are so we can go out and do a better job.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Perry, for joining Those Who Give a Damn. I really appreciate you. I want to get you back on to talk about DC statehood very soon.
Yes.
We didn't have time today, but I want to get you back on to talk about DC statehood with some of my younger scholars. So thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for the next edition. Appreciate it.
Thank you.